So, students, we were on the case of dowry where the marriage alliance does not take place, but the accused and the co-accused have been accused of taking dowry from the girl's father, not marrying the girl, and so on. So, let's go back to the case brief. The appellant, along with his brother, was tried for offences under Section 420 IPC, read with Section 4 Dowry Prohibition Act 1961. The trial court convicted them both and sentenced them to undergo 9 months of rigorous imprisonment and to a fine of Rs 500 each. In an appeal against their sentence and conviction, the Additional Metropolitan Sessions Judge held that no offence under Section 420 IPC was made out and set aside their conviction and sentence for the said offence while confirming their conviction and sentence for the offence under Section 4 of the Act. Both the convicts unsuccessfully invoked the revisional jurisdiction of the High Court. Both of them have now approached the Honourable Supreme Court of India through a special leave. The Dowry Prohibition Act. Let's read about the Act. The Dowry Prohibition Act in 1961 was enacted to curb the evil of dowry. The Act intended to prohibit the giving or taking of dowry and making its demand by itself also an offence under Section 4 of the Act. Section 4 of the Act aims at discouraging the very demand of dowry as a consideration for the marriage between the parties thereto, and lays down that if any person, after the commencement of the Act, demands directly or indirectly from the parents or guardians of a bride or bridegroom, as the case may be, any dowry, he shall be punishable with imprisonment which may extend to 6 months, or with fine which may extend to 5,000, or with both. Thus, it would be seen that Section 4 makes punishable the very demand of property or valuable security as a consideration for marriage, which demand, if satisfied, would constitute the graver offence under Section 3 of the Act. So what is of prime importance for you to note is that the very demand made for dowry is punishable. If the demand is carried out, it is a graver offence under Section 3 of the Act. Section 4 of the Act demeans the very asking, directly or indirectly. Each and every word stated is excessively important for you to gain an entire idea of the perimeter to which this Act extends. Directly or indirectly, dowry demand. So it's the demand, it's not the fulfillment of the demand that is considered as an offence. That is a separate offence under Section 3. Section 4 looks at the very asking for something. Now, another two important phrases or words in this law is bride or bridegroom. So boy or girl. The legislature, while providing for the definition of dowry, emphasized that any money, property, or valuable security given as a consideration for marriage, before, at, or after the marriage, would be covered by the expression dowry. Okay. And this definition, as contained in Section 2, has to be read wherever the expression dowry occurs in the Act. Meaning of the expression dowry as commonly understood and used is different than the peculiar definition therefore under the Act. Where definition has been given in a statute itself, it is neither proper nor desirable to look to the dictionaries, etc., to find out the meaning of the expression. So wherever in law the term dowry has been explained in great detail, therefore you cannot substitute it with the dictionary meaning of the term dowry. The law in itself has described what it understands to be as dowry. The definition given in the statute is the determinative factor. The Act is a piece of social legislation which aims to curb down the evil of dowry, and thus it also punishes the demand of dowry. Dowry Protection Act, though it is a social legislation, it is also a penal statute which is required to be construed strictly. According to the Supreme Court, the High Court has erred in accepting the evidence of G. Narayan Reddy. The Supreme Court held that the critical analysis of the evidence given by Narayan Reddy yields that the evidence is rather difficult to accept without any independent corroboration. There is no corroboration available on record, as even Sri Narsingh Rao has not been examined. Further, there is no satisfactory evidence on the record to show that the appellant cancelled the marriage on account of non-fulfillment of dowry demand allegedly made by him. The evidence of Mr. Reddy, who is the sole witness, suffers from serious inconsistencies and exaggerations. He admittedly is the most interested person to establish his case. He is the complainant in the case. It was he who made 2 complaints to the Director of National Police Academy against the appellant before lodging the FIR. The evidence of PW3, a handwriting expert, is not definite and cannot be said to be of a clinching nature to connect the appellant with the disputed letters. The evidence of an expert is a rather weak type of evidence, and the courts do not generally consider it as offering conclusive proof, and therefore safe to rely upon the same without seeking independent and reliable corroboration. All evidences seem to be rejected by the Supreme Court. Section 67 of the Evidence Act enjoins that before a document can be looked into, it has to be proved. Section 67, of course, does not describe any particular mode of proof. Section 47 of the Evidence Act, which occurs in the chapter relating to relevancy of facts, provides that the opinion of a person who is acquainted with the handwriting of a particular person is a relevant fact. Similarly, opinion of a handwriting expert is also a relevant fact for identifying any handwriting. The ordinary method of proving a document is by calling as a witness the person who had executed the document, or saw it being executed or signed, or is otherwise qualified and competent to express his opinion as to the handwriting. There are some other modes of proof of documents also, as by comparison of the handwriting as envisaged under Section 73 of the Evidence Act, or through the evidence of a handwriting expert under Section 45 of the Act, besides by the admission of the person against whom the document is intended to be used. The receiver of the document, on establishing his acquaintance with the handwriting of the person and competence to identify the writing with which he is familiar, may also prove a document. These modes are legitimate methods of proving documents, but before they can be accepted, they must bear sufficient strength to carry conviction. Keeping in view the inconclusive and indefinite nature of the evidence of the handwriting expert PW3 and the lack of competence on the part of Narayan Reddy to be familiar with the handwriting of the appellant, the approach adopted by the courts below to arrive at the conclusion that the disputed letters were written by the appellant to Miss Vani was not proper. It appears that the demand of dowry was made by the second accused, the elder brother of the appellant, and that no such demand is established to have been directly made by the appellant. The evidence on the record does not establish beyond a reasonable doubt, the key phrase, beyond a reasonable doubt, that any demand of dowry within the meaning of Section 2, read with Section 4 of the Act, was made by the appellant. He is therefore entitled to the benefit of doubt. The appeal was thus allowed. The conviction and sentence of the appellant were hereby set aside. And that is the case. So the case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ordered in favor of the appellant, but saw to it that the co-accused was the one who made the demand of the dowry. Now, these are all parameters which are set within the law as to what constitutes a dowry, what constitutes to be beyond a reasonable doubt, so on and so forth. And based on these, you will assess this case. I will be sending you an article sent by Amit sir also previously. It's called Law and Morality in the next lecture.